Swami, I want to say thank you to you for really taking from the little time you have here in Assisi to come down here to the Portiuncula to discuss this project that I'm deeply honored and profoundly moved to know that you partner in, not just because you give your name to it, but in a deep spiritual way you relate to. It's to do with friendship and the house of friendship and the experiences of friendship. And I just want to begin, before the actual interview, with a little gesture of friendship. Friends give gifts to each other. You've already given me great gifts. You've hosted me in your center, and you're coming here as a gift. And I want to give you a little gift.
Okay.
This gift is a book that I wrote. It was actually David Cornsweet who suggested that I should give it to you. It's a book about the Jewish encounter with Hinduism, a complex process. I myself have been on this journey of encounter with Hinduism for half a century.
Right.
For 50 years I've been studying various aspects, and I've had teachers, and I've been visiting India every year and going to ashrams, and as I go along I make new friends and teachers, and I'm blessed to have you as one of those. And I thought this would be a nice thing to share, because I understand you have lots of free time and you don't know what to do with it, so you can read a book.
You're way off the mark.
I know that.
But I'm happy to receive it from you,
Yeah.
especially about Jewish traditions and Hinduism, and of course during this time of Shabbat. So holy Shabbat to you
Tonight, yeah.
and yet tonight.
Yeah,
And
tonight.
then I'm grateful that I will get to read this, and your understanding of Hinduism and my understanding of Jewish culture will improve.
I would love to be able to have a conversation with you when you've done reading it. I
Okay.
don't know how that will happen, but it would be beautiful if we can continue to converse on the basis of this subject.
Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Good. So we're here ultimately because we both have a feeling for St. Francis, right? If it wasn't that I had a feeling for him, I wouldn't have been here, and it was not. So what does he mean to you? In what way is St. Francis? Are you close to St. Francis?
I think in many ways St. Francis is an inspiration for anybody who is wanting to walk this path of God and dedicate oneself and one's life in the service of mankind. So while there are so many saints in Christianity as well as in Hinduism, most of them have preached a lot of wisdom to the people, but very few have gone out into the society and served the poor. I think service to the poor is something that really attracted me to St. Francis. He was born with a silver spoon. He found a purpose. He abandoned all the comforts that he had received. And then finally he walked this path and served the poorest. I think that inspires me. The service part of it inspires me mostly. And that's why I'm attracted, and that's why we came here and we are sitting together.
You mean this morning at the dedication of the ceremony? You're talking about the future project that we're working on together.
Yeah, even this, the morning ceremony, which we had, that's for a prayer hall, a small prayer hall where we can congregate, and as a part of our ashram in Assisi, but also for the future project that you're talking about, a center for all people of all faiths to come.
So you actually consider something that's a museum and a meeting place to be a form of service?
It is the beginning of service. I would think that that's the theory of service, and then you must follow it up with the practicals, which is to actually go out into the society and serve the poorest and the needy who cannot come to your places of worship.
So what would the impact of interreligious connection have on service per se? Why do we need to create an expensive museum and learn about each other's friendship and each other's religion? We can just go out and serve the poor without all that effort.
That's a good thing to ask, because why do we need to create a church for that matter, or why do we need to create a temple for that matter? I think these are symbols of our culture, these are our identities. These also stand as a beacon of inspiration for generations. You see, today we are sitting here, Portiuncula was built 800 years ago or so, but we are today sitting in the same precincts and feeling inspired. Today St. Francis is not around to inspire us in his physical incarnation, but his work is inspiring us. So I haven't seen the poor that he has served, but I see this Portiuncula, which is in the spirit of dedication he has done for Jesus. So these centers are important, but they cannot be the only things. This is important because this tells the next generation, like a lighthouse shows the ships where the shores are. At the same time, lighthouse is not journey, but it does serve as a guiding light for people who are lost. So these centers are important, but that cannot be the end of all the efforts. These centers should inspire the young men and women. In fact, people of all faiths and from all walks of life, to actually practice what's being said here. When we say we are here to build a better world for everyone to live in, it's not just going to happen by sitting in one place. You have to go out and pull out people from those miserable circumstances in which they're living. And for them, as Mahatma Gandhi said, there are so many hungry people in the world that God must appear to them as bread. So for them, bread is God. That's what Jesus did. That's what St. Francis did. So while on one side they did build a small chapel and did preach, on the other side they did go out into the society and help the poorest and the needy. And I always say in society, it's about the survival of the weakest. And in a jungle, it's about the survival of the fittest. But in human evolutionary path, I think it's the survival of the weakest, and that's what all saints ought to do. And so this center should do.
So if the center focuses on prayer and friendship, then you would see service to others or to the poor as the fruit of friendship and as the fruit of prayer.
Absolutely. You just said when you have friends, you give gifts.
Yeah.
And when you have friends and you think the whole world is your friend, you have to go out and help your friend. A friend in need is a friend indeed. And therefore every community has to go out and help somebody in need. And that should be the outcome, that should be the end result of creating a center of inspiration here.
In other words, the service itself should be interreligious service.
Absolutely. There should not be any discrimination based on faith or based on religion. In fact, I had a conversation with somebody like you before in a forum, and they asked me that what about this religious charity or religious giving that is prescribed by all religions almost everywhere. They all give, but the issue is they want to give to their people of their community or their faith, and that has to be broken down and it should be opened up for everyone.
That's on the receiving side, but also on the giving side, the giving itself should be a collaborative action.
Should be a collaborative action, why not? I'm here, I cannot do some work in the, say, another country far away from here, but I might have a friend in you or somebody who can do that work for me, and that's how we can collaborate and work, and that's how we can serve more people. It's not about who is going and serving, it's about how the service is being done.
No, I meant actually that you would go out as teams, so there would be interreligious teams that go out and serve.
Why not? Why not? In fact, of all the hospitals that we run, we have people from all faiths who work there, and also all faiths who get treated there. Our students who study are from different walks of life, different communities and faiths, and we never discriminated about that. So I think that's what is the motto, that should be the purpose of every center.
I'll tell you what occurs to me as I listen to you. What is friendship? Friendship is the opening of the heart. And what is prayer? Prayer really depends on the opening of the heart. You can't pray with a closed heart. And the more open the heart is, the more the prayer is deep and sincere. And what you're saying is that once the heart opens in these ways, then the natural outcome of the open heart is the outreach to people in service.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It'll melt with compassion.
Exactly.
For the one whom you love. You know, we cannot say we love and we don't care about serving or helping them. I can't just say I love you and I don't do anything for you. That doesn't work. So every time we think that we love, our hearts melt with compassion, we will naturally go out and do something about people's problems.
Right. And you were talking about St. Francis before. Does the Portiuncula per se have any special meaning for you, opposed as
well,
religion?
yes. It's a symbol of faith. It's a symbol of sacrifice. It's a symbol of one man's dedication to his God. It's a symbol of surrender. And I think that's why Portiuncula is so important for us. And every time I come to Assisi, I make it a point to come here. And I also ensure that all those who come with me, when we have workshops, when we have youths coming from around the world, I ensure that they also come and see Portiuncula.
When we met in India several months ago, I told you that initially we had planned for the center to be up the hill at the Sacro, next to across the way from the Sacro Convento, where St. Francis is buried, and then circumstances or providence had it moved here. And you said to me something that struck me very much. You said, well, if it's at the Portiuncula, it's going to succeed, you told me, right? Why would that be the case?
Because a man lives on due to his work. And like where St. Francis was buried is not important. That was the body that was buried, but his spirit lives here, in Portiuncula. And that's why where his spirit is, that's where all his energy is. That's where blessings are. And that's why it should succeed if it's closer to Portiuncula, is what I feel.
Okay, amen, may that be the case. So let me ask you a more theoretical question, and that goes, you've just spoken about the inspiration of a Christian saint. So I want to take this in two directions. The first is, why would you need, coming from India, why would you need to be inspired by a Christian saint? Don't you have enough Hindu or Indian saints that you would need to come here?
Oh, I'm inspired by any act of goodness anywhere. Even a small child who's not necessarily a saint or canonized, if he does some good, I'm inspired by the goodness. However, why it's important is because if you really look at the world, there is an eastern side to it and there is the western side to it. And there are saints on both the sides. And they have inspired people in their own ways. India has a huge number of such sages and saints who have inspired generations of people to walk this path. But on the western side, I find very few examples. And one of the most shining examples of service and sacrifice, surrender and devotion is Saint Francis. So I think if I look at this side of the world, I see Saint Francis as a shining star of spirituality. And therefore I also would like to see or visit here and get inspired by that. And I have a lot of followers who are from the western side of the world. And for them, it is easy to relate to the inspiration of St. Francis.
But then why do you bring your students from India to Assisi? You narrated to me that you put them in front of the Porziuncula and you ask them what it means to give your life to God. I can understand. You say it works for the Western disciples, but why bring people from India to Assisi?
Oh, they should know that God has inspired people of all walks in all places. It's not just a God in an Indian subcontinent who inspires people. God inspires people all around the world. And you can always get inspired by their lives. And more importantly, why I bring these young children, and especially in our ashram here in Assisi, I ask youths to come and have a workshop or a meeting very often. Because St. Francis, as a young man, when you have so many distractions in the world, and he was born in a comfortable home, he could have lived a very pleasurable life, but he chose to do what his heart said. And that is something the young people should know. You can be a bearded saint and all old and frail, and then you try to inspire young people, it doesn't work. He was a young man who sort of chose this path, and that inspires young people. That's why Swami Vivekananda is an inspiration to the young people, because they see their own aspirations reflected in Swami Vivekananda. So that is the reason why I feel St. Francis is a great source of inspiration for young people.
I walked into your ashram today and I saw, in addition to St. Francis, Padre Pio, Dom Bosco, St. Clare, Santa Chiara, and of course Sai Baba. So what is the common denominator in the saints that you find inspiring?
They all did good to others. I think one common denominator for all of them is that it doesn't matter where they were born and where they worked or where they died. But one thing that is common between all of them, including Sai Baba, is that all the time they spend doing good to others. And I have been to even Padre Pio's place, and I've seen inspiration there too. And they also run hospitals for the poor, and walking in his footsteps, many people have taken to this path. So the common denominator, I think, is that they all tried to do good to the world. It was not about themselves, it was only about others. I think anybody who lives a life for others truly lives.
Have you had experience with saints of other faiths other than Hinduism and Christianity?
Not very much, because I think I'm not the saints of the past, but yes, in the modern parlance, yes, many people are there who are still, preaching and following these things, and I've met many of them.
No, but I'm talking about the great ones. We have a shortage of great ones today, unfortunately. I
think not everybody is recorded or documented. That's why it's not easy. You asked me, why should there be a place like this? Because a lot of saints or their work has been lost to the history, and nobody has documented or recorded or presented it to the new generation.
So I'm going to push you a little on this, and I'm going to do this in a roundabout way and then make a proposal. I'll push you on this because the question is, why would one have to study another religion? If all you need is the example of good deeds, then there's no real need to study another religion. And I'm coming from a place where study of religion is important. And I believe you actually resonate with that, but the reason you give for that is not convincing, because if the only reason is to do good, you don't really need to study the other religion.
Where do you learn to do good? Who teaches you to do good? Where do you get to know people who have done good? And many of these religions have taught people to do good. If it was not for Jesus, do you think St. Francis would be St. Francis? He would still be that Francisco, a spoiled brat that we have read about. He became St. Francis because of Jesus. So religion is important, but then religion cannot be so narrow-minded, it cannot be so rigid, cannot be so orthodox that it fails to notice the commonality between other faiths and other religions. It can't be so short-sighted. That's my...
I totally resonate with that, but I want to actually make the argument larger, and that is that we really need to study all religions to understand their ideals and how they've inspired and how the best personalities came through from them.
See, the religion that is presently available to us is what has been written or documented by people down the generations. We really never know what was the original thought. So in many of the religions, when you study, you also see some of very appalling aspects of those religions. When they are, well, that's what I'm talking about, the narrow-mindedness, a lot of orthodoxy, a lot of rigidity. And if you teach all these to the young people, they'll obviously get confused. Because they will ask that this religion also says that you must persecute those or you must banish those and things like that. And I think that is the part which is very dangerous. But I feel in the original form of it, all religions taught people to love, to be kind to each other, to be compassionate, and to love a God, whichever that religion was preaching. But a preaching that goes and says that my God is the only God to be worshipped, I think that's where it creates confusion. So study of religion is important, but in the truest sense. If you give me the original books, the original idea, the original saints, I think that we can teach all the religion to all the people without fear. But in the present context, it's quite distorted, and that's where I take the best part of it. I tell them, as per our Hindu or Sanatana Dharmic philosophy, we tell them 3 things is what you should check on whenever you study something new. 1, whatever is written in the scriptures, religious texts, read that. 2, argue it out, whether this makes sense to you or not. If some religion says, no, only people of this faith are the rightful, whatever, heir to the heavens and things like that, others are not. Argue it out. Is it true? Are other peoples not entitled to heaven or whatever good things in life? And 3rd, experience it. At the start, if you don't experience the thought written in the text, then don't believe in it. That's why Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism stands very strong. It says, argue it out, ask questions, and convince yourself only with experience. Don't simply believe in hearsay. So a lot of religious texts are, as I say, in their present form are not in the best suited to teach the next generation. They'll ask a lot of questions. So I tell them, okay, take the essence of it. You have a fruit. You throw the skin away. You squeeze the whatever flesh, and then you drink the juice. You don't need the flesh or the rind to eat. But that was important to keep the juice. Likewise, all the religious ideas, the rules, the do's and don'ts, help to keep the essence alive. So take the essence of all these texts, and that essence has to be love and compassion. If it has to be anything other than love and compassion, something is wrong with it.
So that is an important way of distilling the message, because in fact, many people have attempted distillation of religions to one core principle. So very often, the Dalai Lama, for instance, suggests compassion is the distillation of all religions. There's the golden rule that suggests thoughtfulness and care for the other. And I'd like to propose something to you which goes back to a conversation we had before, and that is, I have to take a step back. I got into this project 25 years ago of creating the Elijah Interfaith Institute. When someone asked me, where can they learn about the life of saints? At the time it was Christianity. And I've always felt that saints hold the best, finest example for us in doing so. And I went on then to develop this idea under the label of religious genius, and how to study the finest inspirations, people who are geniuses in religion, who can be inspiring not only within their religion, but also inspiring across religions. So you said earlier, well, we may need a museum like this, and a center like this in Assisi, or may we need one like this in India? Perhaps. And as a way of exploring how to study religion that doesn't simply potentially flatten all differences just to love and compassion, because then you really lose. It's like you don't meet a person, you just meet a powder of a person, right? Then you pour hot water, you get good deeds. But you want to get the wealth of the person and the rich of it, is to create something around this idea of saints of different religions as they embody the particularity of their religion, as they can be inspiring to other religions. And in that sense, I personally think that we'll discover many more Francises, both in Christianity and outside Christianity in other religions.
So
I think one possible way of moving this forward, maybe in a center in India, is to take up the idea of the study of saints as a gateway to study the best of religion.
I think so. That's what is practical is about. The theory is the religious texts, and saints have lived those texts in their lives. Yeah. They've showed it how it is done, and because of that, they are moving, walking, talking institutions of those religions. And that is what I think we should teach the younger generation. They get inspired by knowing somebody did walk on this path. And when they hear their stories, it was not always a bed of roses. There were struggles, there were difficulties, there were what we call as dark nights of the soul. And they have gone through all of it and still persisted. And that's what the younger generation needs to know, which is sometimes very impatient. It wants results, instant generation is what we call. They want spiritual results also instantly. It doesn't happen. It takes a whole life and maybe many lives of efforts to reach there. And these saints have shown that. And that's why study of saints and telling their stories to the next generation might be a great idea for this museum.
We can think about this for India. I want to highlight something that you've said, and that's very important for me. And here I think we have a very deep commonality of vision. You've used the term inspiration time and again, and it wasn't in any of, I don't think it was in any of my questions. No, it wasn't. I had appreciation. You used inspiration. This is my word. Why so? Because so much of interfaith is, let's get past the disharmony in society, let's overcome violence, let's even clean up, create a soup kitchen together, or clean graffiti on walls, or do good social action. But it sends, that only addresses the people. It doesn't address what the people can inspire or what the religion can teach. And to me, the purpose of creating an institution like we're talking about is that to be inspired to the example of friendship, to be inspired to the saints, to be inspired through the prayer of another religion. So inspiration is key, and I'm very grateful to you for the fact that you profile this term inspiration in such a central way.
Yes, inspiration is something very, very deep. It changes you forever. Appreciating a thing or responding to something at the surface of it, it is temporary, it doesn't last. Inspiration is very deep. It changes something inside. It changes the very structure, your DNA, your programming. That's why inspiration is important.
So for me, I've been extremely inspired by the spiritual life of other traditions, which is why I mentioned to you that I've been going to India for many years, and I've had friends with other faiths, and I've really been going into these religions. I haven't compromised my identity, but I've received a lot of inspiration and consequently growth. Have you been inspired by the prayer lives of people in other traditions that you've encountered?
As I said, with whatever life I have lived so far and whatever exposure I've had with Sai Baba, who has been the guiding light and guru, and in his center people from all faiths came, they celebrated all their festivals. But of course we have heard many stories of many people from many traditions, but I have a personal liking for the saints of Christianity, especially those who like Saint Francis of Assisi, who gave away all their lives for the betterment of others. That's what Sai Baba did, and that's what inspires me. So I think for me, there are many inspirations, and in Indian traditions there is yoga, there is Advaita, there are so many saints of different schools of thoughts. They're all inspirational in their own way. But I think today's times, religion has to be redefined, spirituality has to be kind of re-explained to people. And the easiest explanation is having love for everybody and translating it to some compassionate action, just as these saints have done. So I don't see many in other religions like this. But in Christianity,
the religion has two dimensions, horizontal and vertical, right? So the horizontal is the relation between people in the society, which is what you're talking about. Vertical is how we are in relation to God. So you keep emphasizing the vertical inspiration, and I want to push you on the question, what about you keep pushing the horizontal. I want to ask you, what about the vertical inspiration, being inspired by the spiritual path of other people as they ascend to God, as something that can inspire your own path?
Oh yes, of course, that's an inspiration too. See, without that inspiration, you can't have these horizontal relations.
Right.
They cannot be harmonious. They'll be very superficial. Like many people ask me, we are ready to do good, but we don't believe in God. We are atheists. Will that work? I said it may work for this horizontal side of the religion, but will you grow? Will you evolve? Will you go into the one that you are destined to be? No. Because you don't have faith in God. You don't have faith in a higher power. You don't know how to surrender. So that will lead to a lot of ego. And this ego that comes out of doing good and being good and knowing yourself as a good person in the society is far stickier. And therefore it doesn't help. So you need both the sides of the religion.
There's this prayer that's attributed to St. Francis. The historical veracity is secondary. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace.
Yes, make me a channel of your peace.
Right? So the whole thing of being an instrument. And we were just talking about that before. You said the two principles would be faith and surrender.
Yes.
Right. So these are the two principles by means of which we can really make progress. So I think as I listen to you, I wonder what inspires us more in the other, the faith of the other, the surrender of the other. I want to say the surrender, because sometimes the faith is particular, and sometimes we don't see the faith, but the surrender we can see.
Surrender we can see. Of course, surrender has this foundation in faith. Only when you really, really believe in something that you surrender to that. And I think that's more intangible. Faith is more intangible. Surrender is seen.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you're right, that way surrender inspires. And that's what I think inspires us here when we come here. Is
surrender. Francis' surrender.
Surrender to the
I really hope that one day our common work, or in some way, or through the encounters with other leaders, you can bring us greater inspiration from your path, and maybe also receive inspiration from more figures than you know that you've had exposure to. Because I personally think that while St. Francis is a shining example, the world's faiths are full of these stellar figures that we want to get to know. So that actually leads to another more theoretical question, which is, do you think religions are self-sufficient? In other words, do religions need other religions to become better, to grow, to address their failings?
As I said, there are certain religions which are very broad-minded, which accept all walks of life, all people of all faiths. But there are certain religions which are quite rigid, quite closed in their approach, and I think they have something to learn from the others, to accept everyone and treat everyone with respect as equals. I think there are certain religions who can learn from others. I come from Sanatana Dharma, and for example, some people may accuse Sanatana Dharma of polytheism, and they may say, you don't have an idea of which God you're worshipping, you just worship anything and everything. And probably an ordinary follower of that religion may not be able to answer these questions. Why do you worship a stone or a tree or a river or anything that is inanimate, and you believe that to be God? But then we have a philosophy. We have an idea. We have, as you must have understood in your encounters with Hinduism, that we believe in the presence of that divine spirit in everything. And that's why we only symbolize that in whatever way, and we worship that. So, for example, we worship an idol. We call it Shiva or Vishnu or whatever idol. Now, we really don't worship the piece of stone actually. We worship the spirit that inhabits it, which is what we believe. So if the idol breaks, we are okay to replace it with another idol and start worshipping again. We have no problem with that. It's not the stone that we were attached to, it's the spirit that was behind this idea that we are attached to. Now, this is something that everyone has to understand. Sometimes misunderstandings can lead to a lot of conflict and unrest. And that is where religions can learn from each other. This is my idea.
I actually have a more far-reaching view of this. I personally think that all religions in some way will be imperfect. And you said correctly, there's some people in the religion that have the understanding, some people don't have. All religions need to grow, and that all religions have the job to help each other to grow. I call this co-evolution. In other words, we grow together. We all have to grow together. I think part of the problem in the paradigm, even amongst Jews and Christians, is that we're willing to be pluralists. In other words, we make room for you, you're legitimate, very nice. I congratulate you for making room for another religion, So every religion is sitting there and passing judgment on another religion. Is it legitimate, is it not legitimate? As an extension of this idea of inspiration that we spoke about, I would say that taking inspiration into the religion means we all grow together. You have what to teach me, I have what to teach you. We have to talk about this deeply enough in order to be able to ascertain where that point of mutual enrichment is and where we grow together for our purposes. We spoke earlier about the notion of purpose. Yes. Every person has a purpose in their life. Yes. Every community has a purpose. Every religion has a purpose. And because we become too self-enclosed, we lose sight of that purpose. And we need the encounter with the other to bring out that fullness of purpose so we all grow together.
Yes, you are very right. And as I said, most of the religions were, not say created, but they were handed down or they were discovered in certain situations. Situations have changed since then. So therefore there is some, I'm not saying upgradation or something, but probably another version of it is necessary in today's times. And that is something that we can learn from each other, that how we also can evolve along with changing circumstances.
I think if we can come to the recognition, then in the same way that we look at saints and we say, they were perfect and we have what to learn, we also recognize our religions, as wonderful vehicles they are, also have imperfection. That's the basis for all of us to grow.
I think accepting that is the way to start.
Yeah. Do you define yourself as Sanatana Dharma. So does that mean that your self-understanding is Hindu, or your self-understanding is something broader than Hindu?
It's broader than Hindu. See, as Indians, since I'm not talking about the last 2 millennia or so, much before that, they existed and they followed a certain way of life. That way of life is called Sanatana Dharma. And unfortunately, most of it wasn't documented then. There was no printing presses, there was no recording or things like that. They were all oral traditions when they learned things from each other, from a guru or the teacher to the disciple. And these traditions have lasted for centuries. The philosophy of it is what is called as Sanatana Dharma, which is the idea of oneness, the idea of one divine consciousness permeating everything and everyone, inanimate as well as animate. And therefore respecting everything, accepting everything as divine is the basic core philosophy of Sanatana Dharma. But its expression in rituals, in customs, in traditions is more or less what constitutes Hinduism of today. So we did not have a word Hindu. In fact, we don't have a word Hindu in any of our texts. It's been given to us by those who watched us from the other side. And I believe it's a Persian term because Sindhu is the river that was flowing, and that's how Hindu came into existence. So much before that, we were following a way of life where we accepted everything as divine, and we knew that the only purpose of one's life is to attain that truth, what we call as moksha or self-realization. And that is the core of Sanatana Dharma, and its expression today as it stands is Hinduism.
Okay, so as Sanatana Dharma, still your concrete religious expression is Hinduism. It's not that
Yes.
you're in Sanatana Dharma, but then you branch out to all religions. You are fundamentally Hindu from a higher Sanatana Dharma
Yes,
perspective.
yes.
Wonderful. I want to come back just with two concluding questions to the center that we already mentioned here. The center that we're talking about here is as the museum, as hope, friendship, prayer. How does it relate to the various initiatives that you're already engaged in?
Oh yes, I just what we discussed just now, purpose, right? So what are these initiatives that we are engaged in, whether it is social service, whether it is spiritual studies, or running free educational healthcare institutions? It's all about giving people a sense of purpose in life. See, when you're too full of yourself, you really don't have a purpose. You may think your purpose is to just keep looking after yourself, but then after some time you sort of grow tired of it, and you realize that's not the purpose why I'm here. And when you start doing good, or when you start sharing and caring and showing love to others, you find a sense of purpose in your life. And that is what I want to teach everybody in this world. What this center can do is it can show people who have lived a life of purpose. It can exhibit them. And it can demonstrate that these are the people who follow whatever religion, whatever faith, but they lived a life of purpose. And the purpose was higher than just looking after yourself and your comforts and your well-being. It was far more than that. And in that they found true happiness. I think that is something the younger generation is waiting to hear.
So there are two terms that come to mind as I listen to this conversation. The one is the notion of service, and the other is the notion of purpose. You could say they're coextensive. In other words, the purpose is service, but it seems to me the purpose is something higher than just
Higher
service.
than service.
Higher
Service
than
is the
service.
way.
So now we understand why we need this kind of a center. It's not just in order to train people. It's
No.
to help, I would say, individuals, communities, and religions rediscover a higher purpose in relation to one another.
Absolutely, you're right. And ultimately the real purpose for which we are here, which is to know the truth. Every religion talks about the truth. The truth is to know who you are. And I think that's something that this center can tell people. And because you are going to, as I said, if demonstrate through the lives of saints and like the Saint Francis of Assisi, and people will
No, this will
listen
go in
to
India,
it.
not here. This is the second project.
Okay, whichever way.
Yeah.
And inspiration can be anywhere. But however you think that we must leave a legacy for the next generation in the language, in a way they understand. You see, you can't open a old textbook of the Old Testament and ask them to sit and read. It has to be innovated in a way that for these times and these circumstances, for the new generation, religion has to really reinterpret itself, and that is what this center can do. It will help now people to learn more about each other.
If you had to put it all into one short wisdom phrase, which is your wish for the center, what would that be?
I think bringing the world together in love and acceptance.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything you would want to add?
No, I'm okay. I just wanted to know that while we build these centers, of course in Assisi, as you have been working with for such a long time, I would also like to see a smaller versions of it in different parts of the world for those who all cannot travel to a place like this. For them, there is some kind of a place to go to, and then whenever they can always come to us.
Well, there's always the internet for that. We can always create an online version of things.
Yes, but I'm not sure. Then this museum could have been on internet too. But there is some physical space people need where 10 of them come together, sit down, sit around a thing, and then.
So we could create the McDonald's of interreligious museums.
Could be.
Little center everywhere.
Yes, little centers of it. So think of it not just as one project in one place, but probably with several smaller versions of it in different places.
It's funny because we are actually, I don't know if you know this, but you're actually touching on something fundamental to this vision, because I started out, we call this a center of hope, friendship and hope. Now, hope is the acronym of House of Prayer and Education. Okay. That comes from a biblical prophecy that Jerusalem will be a place where all the nations will convene as a house of prayer. And the original vision was one for Jerusalem, and then I realized circumstances don't allow it, and I needed to conceptualize or to be inspired to come up with some interim concept that would lead to it. And we actually thought initially of multiple small centers like that, and then Assisi crystallized as an interim step. So the idea of interim steps or multiple steps was already there all along in the background, but actually my great dream, we were talking earlier how much life and energy God will give me to realize what my own purpose is, but my great dream is that from Assisi we make the journey to Jerusalem, which is such a spiritual capital in the world, that more people than any other place look to it, that too can have that presence to transform the hearts and minds.
And Jerusalem is very important for so many people in this world. Multiple faiths have emanated out of that one sacred spot. Probably a center like this, which brings people together again in love and acceptance, in friendship and fraternity, could be a good thought. And maybe many more in different places, who knows, one in each continent.
Let's work on it together. One of the important things that I've been working on for the past quarter of a century as part of the Elijah Institute, but even Elijah Institute crystallized, another probably at least decade of working outside that framework, is really this balance between similarity and difference. And I find that one of the challenges is not to reduce religions just to similarities. In other words, and I say this without criticizing it, but if one says just service, just love, just harmony, then one is overlooking what for many people is essential and saying let's only concentrate on the good stuff of religion or the commonality of religion and not talk about the differences. My approach has been that we need to learn to understand the difference and to see how it empowers the other and not to put the difference aside. So when you finish, you said you had lots of free time, if I understood correctly, and that you will read this book because you have so much free time. When you have another batch of free time down the line, there is a complement volume in which I discuss the status of Hinduism as idolatry. You raised that question earlier, the question of idolatry and the misunderstandings of it. And that book, it's a little bit in the final or penultimate chapter of the book I gave you, but there's another volume in which I go for an entire book trying to think through what does it mean for a Jew to be looking at Hindu image worship and must it be idolatrous and what can be positive about it. And I've spent a lot of time thinking through these issues in various ashrams, in dialogue with various Vedantins. I'll be happy to share this with you. And my own approach is that we need to actually try to understand even the particularity and even the difference as something that is spiritually enhancing to the faith of the other, not as something to just cast aside, but something that actually contributes and shapes and gives particularity to their faith, and that in some way, when a Christian is doing service because he believes in the example of Jesus, I as a Jew don't put aside Jesus and say, great that you're served, or the Trinity, or any other piece, or when a bhakta serves because he's in love with Krishna, I need to understand what does love of Krishna produce, what is love of Krishna, not to say, you just believe in your own nonsense, let's just good things together. So to me, the sense of difference and religious particularity is part of the riches that we need to explore. And that's why I said to you earlier that I would like ideally in an eventual combination, not here in Assisi, but maybe further down the line, to think about the saints, not just because they were models of good behavior or ideal behavior or loving behavior and service, but how like you said earlier, St. Francis wouldn't be St. Francis without Jesus. And that holds true for all those aspects of particularity that we need to go deeper into and to understand and to acknowledge. What would you say about that?
I agree with you, and in fact our differences, call it diversity rather, it enriches us. It helps us to do what we can do in the best possible way. And I think for a Hindu worshipping an idol is the best possible way to express his devotions. For somebody else, it could be another way. I do not have to disrespect them for what they're doing, because they are able to achieve the same goal at the end through whatever paths they follow. At the same time, I think there has to be an explanation for everything. I'm sure there is one in every religion, why they do what they do. And if we bring that aspect out, saying this is the real reason why this religion follows a certain way, then probably even with a lot of differences and what we call as tensions of these differences, because of the misunderstandings and or wrong understanding of why they do a particular thing, can be sorted out. And that will help people open their hearts to understand the logic behind why it's being done that way. And as I said, most of the religions were born in certain circumstances, and those circumstances probably were such that this way of doing things was the best at that point in time. And there has to be an explanation for whatever is being done, because those wise ones who have left these religions behind, they've not just done it off the cuff. There must have been a deep reason for everything. And if we can bring that out and explain to each other, probably we'll become a little more accepting. That's why when you ask, what do you call this house? I call it the house of love and acceptance, I said. Love, of course, has a fundamental value, but acceptance, where differences also have to be accepted and understood in the right way, so that we are able to accept each other.
So maybe I can conclude by issuing to you an invitation. You are a spiritual educator. You do other things, you also do health work, but from my impression, education, everything we've been talking about, the new generation, the next generation, you want to form them, educate them, find the spiritual message, and you don't want to educate them to know Greek and Latin. You want to give them a good spiritual formation to form people who are ready for tomorrow's world based on spiritual ideas. So spiritual educator, I think, is at least a part of a valid description of what you do in the world. I would like to propose to you that being a spiritual educator with the breadth of mind and the openness of heart and the associations and connections that you have here and elsewhere should involve not only seeing how St. Francis serves or the models, but actually that education should really include a more detailed understanding of other religions and how they operate for the common good.
Absolutely. I think I have to learn a lot still. As I said, my exposure has been limited to certain religions which I have been exposed to based on where I studied, with whom I studied, and there's a lot more to be done. And I'm sure in the process of traveling and meeting people like you and many more in the course of time, I will also get to learn a little more about all the religions and understand much deeply, and I can teach that to the next generation as well.
I very much hope that through your affiliation now with the Elijah Board of World Religious Leaders and with Archbishop Nikita, who we just met, these opportunities will be there, and we will all grow in the spiritual co-evolution where you will be inspiring us by your very presence and your Sanatana Dharma, and God willing you'll also be taking inspiration, and this will be exponentially spread out to others, and that's a very beautiful vision, and I'm grateful to you for being a part of it.
Thank you for having me here. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope to see you again and we can discuss more once I've finished reading the book in all the spare time that I have.
Exactly. In all the spare time that you don't have.
Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you.
Well done.